When Skeleton Crew came out, a lot of people were talking about those early viewing numbers, which put it as one of the lowest, I think maybe actually the lowest viewed Star Wars series of all time. So is this the worst show of all time? Or is it simply a victim of things that have come before? The power of many. Welcome back, everyone. We're here to talk about Skeleton Crew. I know some of you have been asking me for this video, and I just wanted to let you know that I've still been thinking about Skeleton Crew. I still have a lot to say about this show, and I want to discuss sort of what happened with it in the aftermath of it now being done for a while, and just reflect on my thoughts on it. So hello, I'm Amanda. You might know me as Vamp, and today we'll be talking about Skeleton Crew, and this will be my review where I go into some of the things I liked, some of the opportunities that I could see for the show, and why I feel that it did not do well. There are reasons. Let's start off with the reception on this. Now, something that I would actually love if anyone has found it anywhere, if you want to let me know where that is, or if you have a link that you can share with me in some way or something, is I was trying to actually find numbers for the whole show, like viewing numbers, not just for the first 2 episodes, but unfortunately that is all I'm really finding about it, and it is not good. It's not good. So the first 2 episodes were viewed so poorly that it was not even in Disney Plus's top 10. And I believe Star Wars Skeleton Crew was the first series that they've done that has not made their top 10 in terms of shows that they've put out that have been Star Wars, which, yeah, it's pretty disappointing. And I think led a lot of people to just think this is a show that I shouldn't be watching. It just is not very good. No one's watching it. Why should I watch it? There are a few reasons why I think that this is the way it is. One, marketing. I just feel like the show was barely marketed. Whenever I talked about it, people were like, oh, is that out? Like, it's one of those. Which I also have to say, it concerns me because Invincible's another one of those shows. Every time I bring up Invincible with people, they're like, oh, did Invincible come out? I wasn't even aware. And I'm like, what is the marketing? What is the marketing for these things? So that's a problem. But I also feel that there is a reason why a lot of people didn't want to watch Skeleton Crew. And that big reason is The Acolyte. Obviously, we covered The Acolyte here on the channel when it was coming out. If you want to go back and check out any of those reviews, I did episodic reviews. You can click. I'll put like a link somewhere up here maybe to that. And the thing is, when it comes to The Acolyte, that was a show that, although I could see the good parts of that show, I also saw the really awful parts of that show. And while I think there was potential for something like The Acolyte, that just wasn't it. The writing was really, really bad in that show. So I think a lot of people, after watching The Acolyte and being disappointed, were feeling kind of fatigued from the Star Wars life. And they were just like, why would I watch Skeleton Crew? Y'all just released The Acolyte and it was awful. Now, that being said, the writing in Skeleton Crew is not awful, actually. I found the writing to be quite delightful, really just sweet, really heartfelt. There's a lot of good stuff in here, and there's a lot of good stuff on a lot of different levels. So not just the writing. I do feel like the writing is good. I don't know if I would say the writing is like the best writing that has ever existed, but the writing in combination with the acting is pretty perfect. And I think that the whole cast does a really great job. I was actually really excited to see Jude Law in this. I really like Jude Law. He plays Jod, who is a kind of mysterious figure. If you don't know Skeleton Crew, by the way, I probably should have said spoiler warning before. Spoiler warning. Let's talk about what this show is about, and then we'll talk about the acting after that. So the show follows a group of kids who basically go on a space adventure. Think Goonies in space. I said that when the trailer came out. I have watched the show and I would still say that now. That's basically the vibe. It's space pirates. I love space pirates. So these kids find this spaceship and they get launched up into space and they go on an adventure and they don't know how to get home. So they get lost in space, which is crazy. And to make matters worse, they come from a world that no one has heard of before. They come from a planet that is apparently very secret. There are reasons for that. You find out throughout the show. They meet Jod. Jod is this mysterious, kind of rough around the edges figure who we aren't really sure who he is initially. Is he here to help? Is he a Jedi? Is he a pirate? What's his vibe? And as the story goes on, we find out that the planet that the kids are from is basically like this treasure planet. They end up ultimately getting home to it, but they have to make the planet susceptible, and Jod and his pirates end up trying to invade the planet, and they have to sort of fight back. And that's basically the whole show. It is a lot of like fun space shenanigans along the way where they go to different places and have encounters, with a lot of stories that also focus on developing these characters as they go along their journey, which I think just translates really well to just a nice, cohesive, fun story. It's not necessarily part of any big, crazy Star Wars plans, but I like that. I like that it's not necessarily trying to be a world-shattering story. It's just a story about some kids that get lost in space. And I think what makes it good is the cast that we have here. Jude Law as Jod is such an interesting character because you want to like him, but he also does do things that are really despicable. And he has a perfect balance of when he's interacting with the kids, just sounding like someone you would kind of want to trust, but in a way that almost doesn't make you want to trust someone because they're so smooth talking. And then he also has these moments where he becomes scary, where he shouts and becomes very threatening, that makes a really fun break between these two sides to him. And you also kind of get a sense that, Jod has a whole story, which honestly, I'd love to hear more about Jod's story. He sounds like he's had quite the life, and that maybe this is why he is the way he is. Whereas these kids are much more hopeful, much more altruistic, because they come from a planet where they didn't have to struggle, and Jod grew up in struggle. And so it's also interesting to see that split between those two sides of Jod's outlook on things and the kids' perspective on things, this kind of hopeful, youthful nature that they have. All the kids themselves are also different and fun, and I think they play really well together in the show. They just are all really talented performers, and just being kids, I was very impressed with that. We have a bunch of characters in this show. The kids are Wim, Fern, Neil, and KB. I think that my highlights would definitely be Neil, KB, and then of course our droid SM33, who's played by Nick Frost. KB is played by Kirana Katter, and Neil is played by Robert Timothy Smith. And I think the reason the script is elevated is ultimately because the heart for this show is just in the right place. A lot of my favorite moments tend to be some of the more emotional moments that we focus on in the script when it comes to how these kids kind of come together. We have these two groups, right? So you've got Wim and Neil, and you have Fern and KB, and they're each kind of a couple of best friends who end up in this fight over the spaceship on their planet that they both find, and they think it's belongs to them. And we also get introduced, with the Acolyte. We talked about the power of one, the power of two, the power of many. We have all of these rules in the Star Wars universe. And in this one, we learn about the rule of claimsies, I think it's called, or keepsies. It's very cute and very fun. And it's basically they end up fighting over the spaceship because they've claimed the spaceship. So Fern and KB make this claim on it, and then they make the boys end up working for them, helping them to dig it out. And along the way, although these two groups, it sometimes seem that they're at odds, although I would say that Neil and KB are just, they're not really at odds with anyone. It's really Wim and Fern that butt heads a lot. In the end, they all end up becoming friends with each other. And while they're all different, there's a lot that they admire about each other. And ultimately, I think Wim and Fern really butt heads a lot because they are both just very headstrong and they have those similarities. But they both end up kind of admiring each other. It's super, super cute. There's a whole episode that I really love where they have to end up getting back to their ship to get off a planet that they're on that's like a luxury planet. And so they're trying to get off this planet, and they decide to split up and go different ways because they ultimately end up having a big fight where they think there's better ways to get back to the ship. So the team splits up, and we get Fern and Neil together, which obviously is a bit different, and KB and Wim together, which is also a bit different. And along the way, KB talks about how Fern always thinks that she can do anything that Fern can do, but in reality, as she has cyborg implants, she can't, because she does have to maintain her implants. And so she feels sometimes like she can't keep up, but she feels like she can't say anything to Fern on, because KB is worried that Fern won't want to be friends with her. And Fern was her first and her only friend. And I love how when this is all explained to Wim's answer is, well, you know, Neil and I would be friends with you. We would be friends with you, so you don't have to be alone. And it's just so sweet. And there are so many moments like that just sprinkled throughout the show that really are heartfelt. I think Wim's relationship with his dad is another thing that's explored in this that I really love, where Wim is just really relishing his childhood and is enjoying being a kid, and his dad wants to see more responsibility, more maturity from his son. And it's just a little line I remember, I think even in like the first episode, that they kind of come back to throughout the show with Wim and questioning, you know, is he allowed to still be a kid? Should he be growing up? Where should he be in his life? Where his dad says to him at night, when Wim wants like a nightlight on, like, aren't you a little old for that? And it's just so sad, because really what this show I feel is about is childhood and this love of exploration, and how in a way when you're a kid, you want to go out into the world and do all these things, and you want to grow up and you want to live all these lives, but at the end of the day you realize that when you do that, you're kind of missing out on what it's like to be a kid and what it's like to be home, and how home is a very special place that we all come back to, where people love us and really do see us for who we are. So it's a beautiful message. I think it's really sweet. It really kind of hit me in the guts a few times in a really, really good way. And that's why I really enjoyed Skeleton Crew. Beyond that, there's also amazing practical effects in this show. They really just went for it. There's also some CG in it, but there's a lot of practical effects, a lot of things that they just did that thing. I mean, just look even at SM33's design. And I also love that SM33 is technically Smee, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that, but yeah, because he's a pirate. And just even though all of the places that we go to, especially when they first get to that outpost, and it's all basically like a pirate hideout is what it feels like that they're at, and then they end up getting thrown in the brig. All of that stuff looks amazing. So when we're talking about some of the sets here, when we're talking about some of the creatures here, when we are talking about the androids, when we're talking about even just props in this show, there's a lot to love along the way. And yeah, the twists are kind of predictable. At the beginning of the show, we're introduced to Silvo. Right away, I thought Silvo's definitely Jude Law's character. We haven't met yet, because I can hear Jude Law's voice. And that was true. But the fact remains that while Jod's being a Jedi, he's not a Jedi. Does he have force powers? Does he not have force powers? All of this stuff that we deliberate throughout the show, and a lot of it seems somewhat obvious. The fun part of it actually isn't necessarily the mystery for us. It's more watching the kids' perspective of it, and that is what I enjoyed about it, is they're trying to figure it out, and so we're kind of along the journey with them. And it also plays with the fact that we kind of know what's really going on, but they don't, so we get to watch their discovery and be like, oh no, and worry for them in that regard. And although, you know, I didn't really think at any point that anything bad was really going to happen to these kids, because that would be pretty crazy. I don't think Disney would go that far with it. There were some parts where I was genuinely concerned, even knowing that I thought everyone was going to make it out okay. Definitely at the end with KB, I was very concerned, and I was glad that I was correct in my assumption that none of these kids will be hurt. So overall, it is just a really fun show where its heart is in the right place, and there's a certain shine to it because the style of it also feels a little bit 80s inspired. It feels, you know, it's got that Goonies vibe to it, and you can feel that there's a lot of inspiration that were taken from other things and kind of lovingly intertwined with the Star Wars universe. I know not everybody might be here for the kind of suburb Star Wars vibes that we get in the first episodes, but I would also say if that's you and you stop there, like, we go to a lot of other places in the show, so that isn't the whole show. And I think it actually does make sense when you learn more about the mystery of At Attan and what it actually is, and why it exists and how it exists. That explains a little bit of why it is the way it is. And I liked it because it was also different. We've never been to suburbs in Star Wars that I can recall, that I've seen anyways in my adventures into Star Wars. So I liked that it's doing something different. It's doing something different while still giving you that familiar vibe. And I think Variety said it best. Allison Herman over at Variety said this about it, and I agree. There's a ceiling on the ambitions of a show that sticks to its Goonies-esque playbook and keeps things so light. Skeleton Crew takes Star Wars to new places only in the literal sense, but the show is able to nail its limited brief and make a Star Wars show that's actually rooted in childhood rather than evoking memories of one's own. And I would agree with that. I would also add that it's nice because when it does even evoke memories of my childhood, it's at an emotional place. It's not just at a nostalgia bait, like, oh yeah, I remember the Death Star. Oh, Death Star, X-Wings. Oh my gosh, look at all these Darth Vader. You know what I mean? So that's what I like about it a lot. Also, although it didn't do well, I don't think in terms of the views, critically, this show did amazing. And I just want to finish this by also letting you know, we can rest assured, those of us that are fans of Skeleton Crew, with the fact that Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have it at 92%, the audience score is at 80%, so it's doing really well there. And I personally would give it a 4 out of 5. It sucks that I wasn't able to put it on any of my lists last year, but it finished so late. By the time I was doing those lists, I don't even know, I can't even put it anywhere because of the time that it came out. But I think it was smart. They put it out around the holidays. I just wish they had promoted it more because I really thought that people were going to be home for the holidays and might watch this show, but I guess not. Great show to watch with your family, by the way. If you have kids, I would recommend watching this one with them. It's just delightful. And even if you don't have kids, I think there's going to be a lot here that you're going to enjoy out of it. That's all for me on this one. Let me know your thoughts on Skeleton Crew and kind of the state of the Star Wars universe. Why do you think it did poorly? Do you have other reasons that you think it maybe did poorly? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Where are you at with it? Let me know your thoughts. And if you watched it, you know, yeah, what did you think? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Why not? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like when I talk about Star Wars stuff, guess what? I also just talked about the game Star Wars Outlaws over here. So if you want to check that out, feel free. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay nerdy. Bye!